So welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar hosted by Procurated. It's one of our new webinar series that we're trying to launch here with Procurated to support the procurement profession and the procurement field. And today we are here for Procurement Amidst a Recession. And I want to thank my good friend and colleague, Jack Pellegrino from County of San Diego, the director of purchasing there. Jack and I go way, way back. We've known each other now for close to what, 15 years, Jack?
Something like that, Mike. We don't want to date ourselves though.
And we have a lot in common, not just public procurement and a passion for public procurement, but Jack and I both have a passion for baseball. We get to spend a lot of time talking about baseball. For Jack, so I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule as well, and for being here today with us to talk about something that's very important to all of us in procurement these days, as we continue to face, the COVID response, supply chain issues, and procurement amidst a recession. We hope we don't get there, but as procurement professionals, we got to prepare ourselves. And so I'm glad you joined us today, and I'm excited to hear about what you're doing as an organization in response to this and preparation, and how you're pulling your team together and get them ready for a recession. If it does or doesn't happen, it's always best to be prepared. As we know, as we faced COVID, we didn't have an option to be prepared for that. It was something unforeseen and something none of us had ever faced. So Jack, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. So why don't we go ahead and talk a little bit about myself. As Mike said, we've known each other a little bit over a decade here, share similar passions and thought processes about our profession that we have. And one of the things, as Mike, since we were both counties, you just being retired from the county and you left me behind, be still working. But one of the things, the world that we live in post-pandemic is totally different than what you and I, just 2 short years ago thought about our procurement profession and the supply chain specifically. I think both you and I have talked about, we grew up in a JIT, just-in-time mentality. We didn't think very deeply, or we didn't think about supply chain. All we knew is we ordered stuff and we got it. And we usually got it on time. And in the quality and the quantity and at the price that we wanted. Well, guess what? COVID happened and all that changed in our world. So when you asked me to do this with you and talk about procurement amidst a recession, procurement is, whether we're in a recession or we're in an emergency. I think what you and I have decided is we need to do procurement differently. Okay, from top to bottom, from start to finish, we need to retool ourselves. And over the next several slides, you were kind enough to give me the first part of this presentation. And so please jump in here, Mike, if you want to add some color. You can be my color guy as we go through this. So why don't we just go ahead and maybe just move on to the first chart here, Mike.
Sure. And before we do that, Jack, you make a great point. We got so comfortable with that just-in-time desktop delivery. Order it and you get it immediately. We got used to that. And so we kind of did away with our supply warehouses, our stocked inventory for emergency response. And we got caught. We got caught not having the supply and resources we need. So you made a great point. So with that, I'll advance over to the first slide. So,
this is the key reason you and I come to work every day, or us as procurement professionals, is to get things done for our organization in the most effective, efficient, and economical way. Okay. And it's not just the recession. It's not just an emergency. It's not where we're doing, the time that we're doing it changes how we have to perform. When, like you mentioned, before the pandemic, we were just in business as usual. You know, we found our sources came to us. Yes, like you, we didn't have a warehouse, okay? And everything was on time delivery. Now I have a warehouse that's fully stocked. I'm thinking I am once again in the warehousing business. Not saying I love it, but if it's not in the warehouse, I am now looking deeper in our supply chain to understand, is it going to be there when I need it? And really the next part of this, I think the next sub point here you have on this chart, Mike, if you would, the only way we can be successful in today's environment is to think more strategically and use the tools that are available to us. Excel spreadsheets are no longer effective and efficient for me. And Mike, when you were running your warehouse, you needed to have real-time information, and that was an Achilles heel with me during when we were in the middle of the response to the pandemic. Is I needed to literally have hourly updates on what I had and when stuff was coming in. And none of us, I think, in our recent memory can remember us needing to be that time urgent. So strategic sourcing and the better use of technology is critical to our success.
Well, and you make a great point there, Jack, and it's not just tracking what's coming in, but what was going out and where it was going to. And was it merchandise or materials in response to an emergency that you needed to have come back to restock for the next emergency? You know, and some of us were just facing COVID, where in Monterey County, I was facing COVID and 3 major fires all at one time.
Right.
And so it was important that, like you say, that technology, we had to be able to track what was coming in, but what was going out and where was it going? Because we had to report back up to the state on those items that they were giving us. How were we utilizing those goods and those resources? So yeah, it's a great point.
Okay. So let's move on to the next chart and strategic sourcing. You know, and what does that mean? A lot of people, there's different definitions, and I'm sure your organizations, the folks, the 36 people that are on this call, your organization may have a different view of what strategic sourcing is. Okay, Mike, I think you and I want to broaden that view of what strategic sourcing means, especially amid of where we're at, you know, post-pandemic here. And really understanding that data, like you said, the data, whether it's coming in or it's the data that you have, or projecting what you need in the future. And we're looking into the marketplace, trying to find the most capable vendors, suppliers, partners. That should be a new word. If you haven't started using that in your vernacular, I will tell you, start using it, start finding partners, because Mike, you and I have talked about this. The only reason our counties were successful is because of those vendors, suppliers, and contractors that acted like a partner with us. You called them at 6 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night, and they got something for you, or told you when they would get something for you for a fair, reasonable price. So it's kind of a different mindset. Strategic sourcing is broader and deeper than what we've ever considered.
You know, Jack, and I think you and I started talking about partnerships with our suppliers 4 or 5 years ago, as you and I both got on to an association we both sat on. As board members, we started talking about it way back, about the importance of partnering with our suppliers and treating them as partners and not as the enemies.
Right. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't or can't. We shouldn't. Our relationships remain arm's length, and they always will. But we're just upfront about that. And we know where that line, we make sure the lines don't get blurred. Okay, next slide. So, you know, and it really is, you know, one of the big things right up front, strategic sourcing does not mean that you're not using competition. You are using competition to the fullest extent. And competition brings out the best of everything. It determines that your present suppliers, your present partners, if they know that there's competition there, they're going to stay on their game for their current performance. And hopefully they're going to continue to bring you innovation to stay as your partner. Okay. So I think that's really a mind shift. In the past, we've thought of strategic relationships as being, well, I pick one. It's the old, Mike, do you remember the old Toyota model? And it used to say, well, the reason why Toyota built such good vehicles is because they only had 2,500 parts providers versus Ford, with all due respect, had 25,000. Well, there is some truth to that. However, I will tell you that they still competed. Toyota still competed for those parts. Otherwise, the cost of that vehicle would be unreachable without that full and open competition.
And Jack, what would you say is a good rule of thumb here for how often should you be reviewing the effectiveness of your procurement policies in helping you utilize full and open competition?
I would say it's I'm going to say continuously. And that really has changed in the world because of the recession that I'm in, because of the post-pandemic world. It needs to be continuous. Okay. You may have a 5-year contract, a 7-year contract, a 3-year contract. However, I should be continually looking at the marketplace to determine that, are there better solutions out there? You and I have talked about this philosophically. We're on a 5-year cycle mostly. There are some supplies and services I need to have a longer horizon on. So I might go out to a 7-year contract, or even for example, our internal, we have a contractor that runs our internal infrastructure, our IT, everything IT in the county of San Diego is run by a contractor, which is great because it's a one-stop shop. I have a single belly button to hold accountable, but I'm not going to transition that contractor every 3 years or 5 years. That's actually a 12-year contract. It was a 7-year with a 5-year option. So that's different than some of my other service contracts and some of that maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years. But I would say that you should be looking at it continuously, because even though I'm in a 7-year contract, I may want to go out early because the marketplace has changed.
Well, and you make a great point there too. And because you're in a 7-year contract, doesn't mean you don't allow yourself to get complacent with that contractor in their performance of that contract. It doesn't mean they have 7, you don't ever look at them. You should be looking at them, as you say, every year.
Right.
How are they performing? Are they meeting the requirements of the contract? And not just how are they performing with you, but how are they performing with others that they may have contracts with? Because that tells a lot about a supplier as well.
Right. And that's, I think, Mike, if you will, if you want to bring up a couple other points here on this slide, I would say an Achilles heel, whether it be most organizations, is how do we continuously review contractors' performance? I will tell you, it's one of my Achilles heels. Usually I review contractors' performance when I get an issue, when I get a phone call. That's insufficient in today's world. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to change here internally with our folks. And it's, the size, I run an aircraft carrier here. So although I'm spinning the wheel, okay, it takes a while for that mechanism to get to the water so we can start turning this. The portfolio, I think, I have 3,000 contracts that are active that we manage. And we're adding about 1,500. We're replacing some 1,500 every year. So Past performance is something that we're going to really start looking at even more deeply. So I can be more proactive rather than reactive. And so that's something that I think each and every public organization needs to start looking at, large or small.
So how would you say on a scale of 1 to 10 as an agency, how well are you internally communicating those supplier performances from the end user who's actually receiving the services or goods back up to your procurement team?
I would say current state for me, although I now have, as you know, we have cores, contract officer representatives for every service contract. We instituted that about 3.5, 4 years ago prior to COVID. We've trained them. We put them through an academy, a lot like you did up in Monterey. As a matter of fact, you were kind enough to let me plagiarize a lot of that material for that academy. So we've trained up our contract, I call it our contracts managers, which is not the procurement shop, but it's the end users that are managing the contracts day to day. And on a scale 1 to 5, I would say we're maybe a 5. Okay. I need to be at an 8 or a 9. So that's where some of the things you're going to talk about here is very interesting to me in the future. Okay. Next slide. Clearly, a lot of words on here. You might want to. We won't. Mike and I won't read them to you. You can look at them at your leisure. It really is about past performance evaluation is integral to your life cycle procurement process, from beginning to end and everywhere in between. You have to do a continual assessment of what I'll call it, how you do your business, the timeliness of that, how are your policies set up? What tools are you using? And I think that's one of the things that I found. We're starting to invest in our tools. As Mike, as I mentioned to you, I put in a new contracts management system. I did it right during COVID, which was crazy that I was doing it during COVID, but I did. And now I have a new upfront sourcing system to find suppliers, a more diverse set of suppliers. And so I can look in and control my supply chain better than I ever have had. I didn't have that in my old procurement sourcing system. And then on the back end, I would say looking at day-to-day performance, which then, if you will, it's a circle. It comes back in and plays into contracts management, obviously, and also future awards. It should be eventually taking that performance data and plugging it into my award cycle of why I'm picking certain vendors over other vendors.
And that all leads into an important point in bullet number 1 is those real tangible cost savings. Is how do you identify those, how do you track those? And that's through all of these reviews of your processes, upkeeping your processes, and if needed, changing or enhancing processes to make sure that you are reaching tangible cost savings, and not just in the product or service cost, but the long-term cost of a vendor, maybe by poor performance, or is it good performance? Because a bad performing supplier can cost you money, which is a tangible cost.
Right. And how many times, and again, going back to what I said earlier about how do we know, how do you know you had a problem? It's usually because you got that phone call from the executive saying, Jack, this contractor is not very good. And oh, by the way, anecdotally, they've never been very good. I know that runs a chill down my spine. And I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me a lot earlier and let it get to this point? So that's what we have to overcome, ladies and gentlemen, somehow, because we're not doing ourselves, our organization's benefit by waiting until there's that issue gets to the point, it bubbles up to the executive level.
Jack, and I know you have division chiefs. How much of the time of your division chiefs would you say is spent on performing those detailed analysis of your current policies and practices? You know, maybe to strengthen somewhere, to identify weaknesses. How much time would you say is spent by your chiefs?
Let's see, by the chiefs, as you know, I have an assistant director too, Alan. He is
Well,
my
he keeps you in
guru.
line.
He keeps me in line, and he's the keeper of my my policies and procedures, our policies and procedures. But I would say I've asked my team, my chiefs, and everyone on our procurement team to bring up operational issues, barriers, challenges continuously. So I would probably say we're critically looking at our policies and procedures a lot more frequently than we ever did. In the past, we had organizationally sunset reviews. For example, I know I have 5 policies that are Board of Supervisor policies that are going to be reviewed, and the sunset review is usually a 3 or a 5 year period. Well, in today's world, if you haven't looked at your policy minimum of every 6 months, you're kind of way behind, okay? Because we've been doing it probably once a year, and we found that that's not sufficient with the change of the world that we've faced over the last couple of years. So maybe 15.
So before we go on to the next one, there's a few questions. Might as well just jump them in here. There's a question from Sandra. Has the county considered using a countywide contractors to store the PPE supplies instead of maybe you storing them yourself?
The answer is yes, to an extent, but really what we've started talking about is what is my rights for first draw, okay, or first allocation of those resources. You have to be very careful. This is my view of having people I'll call it pre-position your inventory, because there's other things you have to think about the expiration of that inventory. So if I have and control, so as soon as I pay for that becomes a county property and asset. And so I could end up causing myself a nightmare in auditability and also control by doing that. So my approach is, rather than building a whole bunch of, I would call it multiple warehouses in there, it's rethinking about the visibility I can have on my ordering, and I'll call it first availability of supply. Does that make sense, Mike?
It does. And it's a good question, because it comes back to the fact too, that you don't want to order a whole lot of PPE supplies and have them stagnant in a warehouse where they start to date out. Right. You don't want to have that inventory, because now you're eating that inventory and you're eating those costs. It would be better to partner with some type of supplier or contractor that says, okay, here's my supply of emergency items that I'll need in case of an emergency. You guarantee to have these set aside for us in a warehouse ready to go on our call. To me, that makes more sense. And again, that's reviewing your policies, your past practices. Past practices might not be the best practice going forward, especially what we've been facing.
Right. Make a good point about, let's talk about PPE supplies. And 95 specifically, as you knew, I think I told you, we had 900,000 N95 masks in our inventory. Guess what? They were all expired. Guess what? When we went to pull them out, the elastic bands had deteriorated. So one of the first procurements that I did in the middle of the night, pretty much was in the middle of the night, bought 1 million rubber bands to retrofit 900,000 masks with the elastic. And they were latex-free rubber bands. I never knew I would learn anything about rubber bands, but that's how we did it. So you have to be very careful about what you inventory and what you pre-position, like you said.
And lots of staples and staple guns.
Yeah, actually, I got 100, and we had a nonprofit that did it. That repaired these masks to make them useful for us. So it was really crazy. Anyway, let's move on to technology. And are there any other questions here that you want to ask? I see a couple in the questions and answer thing. You want to cherry pick any?
We got those already.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So use of technology. The key thing is, as you said, Mike, looking at your practices today, in today's light, okay? And you may have reviewed it last year, and you're going to find that it may be insufficient for today where we sit. And the cool thing about technology, it can really help you, I'll call, if you're staying current, help you be more effective and going forward. If you open your mind to doing that. For example, you say here, it can help you make both manage current performance as well as make future selections. I mentioned that. And I would say of equal importance, explain to your leadership and to the public why you're selecting contractor A over B. We are all required to use best value. And if I can document why supplier A is doing better than, in past performance, it may not be the lowest price, but their performance is timely. It's, the quality complaints are minimal. It's not to say they never have any issues, but they quickly resolve that. That's worth its weight in gold, if you will, to justify why you are going to A over B over C.
And that's why it's important on those supplier references, that they give us. We all know, we've been in procurement long enough. We're getting their best. We're getting their best references when they submit
Right.
a solicitation or proposal. We're getting their best references. And so it's upon us to do our due diligence and really understanding how are they performing with other potential clients.
In a way, Mike, when I buy things personally, sometimes I drive my family crazy because I'm like, you're researching the heck out of this, Dad, and I am looking for those commercial reference points. I'm looking on Yelp. I'm looking at. I'm doing my Google, the greatest invention known to man, looking at Google and other sites to see what people say about them. Knowing if I'm looking at their own site, they're cherry picking and they're putting the best references first. Now, there's also, I have a little bit of caution about Google because you can sub-optimize Google too if you're a paid partner, and you can suppress things on Google. But that's what's very interesting to me about your tool, is that stuff is not suppressed. It is out there for all of us to see, which I think could be very helpful.
Well, and you make a great point. When we buy personally for ourselves, I think we do more due diligence than we do when we're buying for our agencies. In some cases, I went out and bought a truck. Okay, I didn't just take the word of the manufacturer for that truck. I called friends that had trucks. Okay,
Right.
what type of truck do you have? How does it perform? I did my due diligence in checking with others that had similar vehicles or maybe the same vehicle I was looking at. But I didn't go to the manufacturer's website and take all of their raves and reviews by certain customers.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's something we need to bring to work with us, Mike. And I know I'm starting, but it becomes like we come to work, and it clearly what we do at work can be a lot more complicated. There's a lot more, and the magnitude of it is significant. So again, it's about how do we bring those best practices. Like I tell my team, I'm not asking you to do anything wouldn't naturally do before. The difference between doing it at home and doing it here is I'm asking you to write it down here and document it here.
Yeah.
At home, my boss, I got one person to report to, and you know her name.
And she's tough.
She's also my bookkeeper. Okay. So you went to Lowe's again. Now what did you need at Lowe's this time?
Yeah.
Well, I really needed that, honey.
Yeah. So as we, as we talk about suppliers and performances, so how can you, or how do you as an agency reduce the impact of a supplier at poor performance in your agency?
It's really upfront writing good work requirements and contract monitoring after award, whether that be actual milestone reviews or actual product reviews upon things that are delivered. And again, I mentioned that we spent a fair amount of time designating contracting officer representatives. We put folks through 2 full-day sessions on how to monitor contracts. And you monitor contracts by rule number 1, read the contract. Rule number 2, read the contract again and monitor to what's in the contract. And if it's not in the contract and you think you should be monitoring it, change the contract and put it in there. Because none of us writes a contract. Unfortunately, many of us write a contract. We take the old one, we update it, and we think that's sufficient. But as we just talked earlier, it's really insufficient based upon where we are in today's reality. So, and really something, this is an area of improvement, is using supplier reviews by first within your organization. Number one, because many of my enterprise is so large, I have multiple people that may be using the same contractor under different contract vehicles. And the thing that hurts the most is when I was unaware of bad performance in one area, and here I am on the other side of this, awarding a new contract to that same company. Okay. So, and it needs to be in writing to some extent, because you need to have, I'll call it a transparent process that allows for adequate rebuttal, if you will, or, feedback from the actual supplier. There may be things that you're not aware. For example, the performance was something that you did impacted, or there may be other issues that impacted that performance.
So how important, Jack, is it to you as the county? You're a large county, and County of San Diego, a large county, and you have a lot of local cities, other agencies around you. How important it is to share your supplier reviews with your peers and vice versa? In a community, you're all utilizing the same suppliers. How important is that?
I will tell you, it's very important. We don't do it as well as we should. Okay. And I would say, candidly, we do it more. We do it anecdotally right now. My biggest, clearly the city of San Diego is the biggest entity besides myself that's embedded within the county. But I have regular communications with their director on the very biggest procurements. And clearly, if they have a supplier performance issue, Claudia will pick up the phone and call me, and I do the same for her. Unfortunately, I will say, Mike, that it's when I'm about ready to issue a cure notice, or worst case, I put someone under default.
Yeah.
Then I'm calling, and because both of us have policies, we will not award to someone that has been defaulted or under cure with another public entity. We all check SAMs, right, for the federal department list.
Yeah.
So I will say, is it important? It is absolutely important. And that's where I think we need to strive as a profession to do better in sharing that information in a timely manner, in a more detailed manner. So it's not just the very biggest ones.
Good point. Good point. So let's move on to the should haves and would haves. And these are some of the things that you and I had discussed early on.
Right. One of the things, if I walked into my general manager's office or our CFO's office or our CAO office and said, well, there's nothing I could have done, it was out of my control, I know the look that I would get, right? So I don't use that one much. Because the answer would be,
we all have
that's
crystal
why
balls, though.
But here's the thing is, their answer would be, but that's what I pay you to do, is to have some degree of control. And so the second one makes me smile. I'm not sure, but I have a strange feeling about this, but I guess they're okay. Gut feelings are great, but they're insufficient. Okay. So that's something we have to come. And the other thing is, I love the last one here. Well, when we checked them a year ago, they were fine, or upon award, and now they're not.
Nothing's changed in 6 months.
Nothing's changing in a week. So, boy, that's a pretty intense slide, Mike, that one. I don't know, that's and I think your point here is, the engineer had warning signs that he didn't act on soon enough, right? Didn't share it for whatever reason. I don't know the specifics of it, but this, going back to my earlier comments and our earlier comments about continuous feedback, timely feedback, not just at defined increments. It really has to be as close to real time as you can get. Otherwise, you could have very bad results.
Yeah. And here's a good one I always reminded agencies in my county at the time was, they said, well, we worked with them 5 years ago. I said, okay, 5 years ago, do they still have the same staff and personnel that they had 5 years ago?
Right.
Are they still as detailed as they were 5 years ago? Do we know that? How do you know that? Have you done a performance check on them? No, we used them 5 years ago. They were good. Yeah. Well, you don't know that. Their personnel could have changed. Their staffing could have changed, and you end up with something like this because their staffing changed and their deliverables and their overall performance has changed, but nobody really checked on it.
Right. So next slide, Mike, is, I think all of these things, we have been asked as in the procurement profession to look more deeply at who we select and why we select them. That's been one of our big areas of focus for the last several years now, looking at best value procurement. I don't always go to the lowest price unless I'm legally required to under the California Public Contracting Act for public works, and we won't open up that can of worms here. What I think
that's another whole seminar.
But otherwise, I select on best value, and I would say that our considerations we need to start looking at current and past performance more deeply as a factor for award. As also you mentioned here, minority businesses, our socioeconomic local businesses. And I think that's one of the areas that I think I'm going to be challenging some of our cooperatives I need to see that information. I need to understand how they're contributing to the positive benefit of our region, whether it be the sound, the not only Southern California region, but also in my locality, the County of San Diego region. So anyway, that's all part of us selecting the right supplier.
There's a good point and leads right into this slide, about what you can learn through references. Where those references come from, who are you seeking those references from? And you can learn so much. Is it a thumbs up, thumbs down, like the picture shows on this particular supplier? And what did they not tell us? What is a supplier not telling us during a solicitation in the reference process that we maybe can find out from our peers? And it goes back to what you said earlier, just communicating and finding out.
So a little nuance I'll share with everyone. In our RFP template, Mike, you may have seen this when I've looked at some of my documents. We ask for specific references, but then in that RFP document, we say, please provide us 3 or 5 or how many references, probably never more than 5, but you provide us 3 references. However, the county may look at other information that is available to us. So we have that ability. And like you said, I often pick up the phone and call other entities, notwithstanding the 3 that they give me, because they're not going to give me 3 bad ones, right? But I'm going to use my colleagues to, I'll say, get another perspective that may not be in the 3 cherry-picked good ones that you're going to get in your proposal.
And that helps with answering all of these questions here that that we have talked about as well. How responsive is the supplier ethical?
Right.
Did they honor the terms? All those things go into reference checks, and that's how important reference checks are. Because it's better to heat all these off before you get into a contract with a supplier than be in that contract 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the road.
So I appreciate when you showed me this presentation that you did. I really appreciate this questions, because it's not just, did I get a contract? What's the value of the contract? What's the term of the contract? Was it successfully completed? There's a lot, as we started this discussion, with a lot more depth that we're required to find out about a provider before you go into the relationship. Because once you get into it, if it's not good, you're going to find yourself a lot of heartache trying to change or get out of it. So good list, Mike.
Well, thank you. And Jack, I want to thank you for being part of this first part of this presentation and for all of your input. I do look at you as a colleague, as a peer, and as a friend. We've talked a lot of things back and forth. I've always called you when I was questioning something or had a question about a supplier. We're definitely there to help. And I thank you for your time on this. And I had told Jack that I was going to let him off the hook as I go to the second part of this real quick. Is, as we talked earlier on in this presentation, the technology answer. How are we using technology currently in our operations? And this is something that I looked at during my entire 21 years with the county I was with here in Monterey County. I always looked at technology, but not just, can I bring technology in? How is it going to help me and my team perform in really identifying, selecting the best contractors, having the best contracts in place, and responding to my customer needs in a timely and quick fashion. I never wanted procurement to be known as the holdup or the black hole or the delayers. I wanted departments and users to come to us because we had the answers, we had the information they needed. And so technology, it's here. And being with Procurated now, Procurated is that software. Procurated is a platform, and I don't want this to be a sales pitch to anybody on the webinar. I just want you to know that there is technology out there and there is technology available. And Procurated is a platform where you can share supplier reviews with your peers. It's free. There is no cost, there is no contracts. You can go on today and get a login as a county, as a public purchasing individual professional. You go in and get a login for free. There is no commitment that you have to utilize the system, but you can go in and do searches for suppliers. You can help build your bidders list. You can look at reviews that have been written by your peers. Right now, there's a ratings review site. It is for the public sector. We have over 41,000 supplier reviews to date. You can evaluate suppliers quickly just by looking at peer feedback, and you can share feedback about vendors, as Jack and I were mentioning earlier on in discussion. How do we share information about how our suppliers are performing outside of our agencies, outside of our silos, across the board nationally? Procurated is that platform. It's available again. You can visit the site for articles. We have related articles on how to use Procurated. We have a webinar-based series. We have podcasts. You can also follow Procurated on LinkedIn. Some very informative information. We have over 150 years of procurement experience on the Procurated team, willing and ready to help you as public agencies. By joining Procurated, you are joining a community of public sector professionals across the nation. Right now, we have 7 partner states. We are working on some additional partner states. We have individual users within cities, counties, school districts, special districts, and we have some university partners. Purdue is a big university that just recently came on and launched with Procurated. The Procurated landing page is very helpful. There's a user login request. If you go to www.procurated.com, again, just by using your agency email, you can have access to the platform. We have lots of tutorial videos on how to help you use the platform, but also how to understand supplier evaluations, how to add supplier feedback, how to write a meaningful supplier review, not just for yourself, but for your peers across the board. We have a F&Q tab, and then quick tips on review writing. We want to make sure that this is an informative page, a platform that is there for you as public agency procurement professionals. Some facts about Procurated. Who will see your review? Only Procurated users who are verified public sector employees can see your reviews. There is an option to review anonymously, so you can leave your name or not, but we do know who you are in the background. One of the biggest questions we get is, will a supplier see my review? Only if you check yes on the review form will a supplier see your review. Otherwise, they are maintained only in the back area for those certified, verified public sector users. How do you gather reviews? Well, we look at written reviews from our users. We also send out emails, or we do phone calls from our behind the scenes Procurated team asking for reviews. And these are reviews that are important to not only you, but to your peers as well. Here's a sample of a review writing document sheet. It's very simple, very quick. And here down at the bottom, you see where it says display my name with this review, or you can make your review visible to supplier. If you uncheck that blue box, you become an anonymous reviewer. So the product or service, again, is contracted, any necessary context. We want you to identify in their reviews, what are you purchasing? Is it goods or services? Were there supplier strengths, if applicable? We also want you to be honest with supplier weaknesses, again, if there are any. And then we want your final impressions and any recommendations to other buyers. This is where you, public procurement professionals, can share your interactions and performance of your suppliers that you are utilizing today. Procurated use cases, again, it is a source page where you can source out and look for new potential suppliers. You may not know about some suppliers in your area. For example, at the County of Monterey, there was suppliers that were being used by the City of Monterey or the City of Salinas. I didn't even know about because we didn't share that information. It's a good platform to share that and a good platform to source potential new suppliers. You can evaluate. Again, this is where you would evaluate your suppliers, and there's a page to share feedback with your peers. Writing a review is simple. It's simple steps. Find the supplier, write the review, and hit submit. Again, we didn't want this to be a salesy pitch, but again, we just wanted to inform you, as Jack and I were talking earlier, there is technology out there. There is technology out there to help you do your job, how to improve in your job, but also to make and streamline the processes that you and your team are doing. I know, and Jack will probably attest to this, is that when a recession hits, budget cuts happen, usually it's the procurement team that's hit first. In most agencies, the procurement team isn't looked at as important. That is changing. I'm glad to say that it is changing, some of the statistics that I've been reading and keeping up on, but we're always the first ones to ask to reduce. And we're asked to do more with less. And then when a time of an emergency like COVID or fires or floods, earthquake, whatever it may be, who they come to first in response? Procurement. And I don't know about your agencies, but in mine, I also sat as logistics section chief for our Office of Emergency Services. So my team became logistics in purchasing emergency supplies as well as the day-to-day supplies. So again, we just want to attest to you and ensure you that there are platforms out there, there is technology out there to help you better do your job. And I think, Jack, you want to jump in?
I'll just, a little closing remark for you. Yeah, we have become, there's a lot of discussion, and should be in our profession, that we, procurement professionals, need to be integral with our operation rather than back office. We need to be strategic. Every one of our bosses expect that. And it's really how we view ourselves and what we bring to our job. If we wanted to have business as usual, sit in the background and just process paper, well, guess what? That's what we're going to do. But we've been asked to be more than that. Mike, you and I, likewise, when we started our emergency, I was the logistics chief in our emergency operations center and scoured the world for, you wouldn't believe, everything from N95 masks to hand sanitizer, to temperature scanning portals, to, we had quite a, so that's where I see it as our challenge and our opportunity. So more of an opportunity than a challenge. And at the end of the day, if we can say, we found many times when we did that reference check, we found out there were suppliers there we didn't even know about. And that's really the strength of a tool like yours, I think, can help all of us as a community. So
great point. I'm going to open it up. Any questions out there? There is a question, will the PowerPoint be available? Yes, we'll make this available. It is being recorded. That we'll make that available. Steve, I'll work with you so we can get this made available to the attendees.
Perfect.
And Sandra, I think I had Sandra had a question there. I think I answered her privately, but basically it goes back to what we talked about earlier about pre-positioning supplies, and the worry of that is expiration that I mentioned. Whether I don't want to be a warehouse again, but one of the models that we have moved out on or are considering is my partners procurement partners or cooperatives or other entities will give me first right of refusal for a commodity, for a product, and will keep it fresh for me. So for them, they're just turning over the inventory. I'll give you an example. Hand sanitizer, okay? Believe it or not, hand sanitizer expires. So the second I take it in, the clock starts ticking.
Yep.
So, and it really is about sources of supply, having more. The old days of having fewer, there's some optimization that we need to find, and I don't know what, it's different for every entity.
And we have one hand up, so I'm going to allow Sandra. Are you there?
Yes, in regards to my question, I was talking to McKesson actually, and it's mainly because as a hospital, CDPH is mandating us to have certain amount of reserves, and Edgemoor doesn't have the space for it
Yeah.
that we're supposed to in the future have on hand. So that way we're not stuck with not having enough supplies.
Sandra, you and I, we're in the same organization. So our medical operations is, for the agency should be providing you that, I'll call it emergency supply coverage. So offline lets me and Rob Sills and get together and talk through that. And again, you know, it's impractical and not reasonable to have. We're one county. We have one medical emergency operations supply center. That's a warehouse. We don't want to have multiple centers around the region. So let's talk about that offline, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you, Sandra.
All right, I don't see any other open questions there. If anybody has any, if you want to pop them in there, I'll give everybody about a minute. I don't see any other hands up. So as we're waiting, Jack, again, I just want to thank you, Jack, for your time and willingness to do this. You know, even though I'm retired from the county, I'm still very passionate about procurement. I'm very passionate about making sure that, you know, procurement teams have the tools and the opportunities they need in front of them, and it won't stop. I'm still heavily engaged in, you know, our in Capo as well. So I want to thank you for partaking in this and participating with, and your willingness. I want to thank you very much.
Yeah. And thanks everybody online. Hope this helped, gave you some insights that you may not have had before. And we'll see you all in Boston for NIGP, right?
We'll be there.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye all.
Have a great day.